Hello. This training that I am recording for you today is concerning the 4 different attachment styles. I mentioned at the end of the training on the interviews and questionnaires that I felt it would be useful for everyone to have a training on that. Some of you are probably familiar with the attachment styles, but maybe not everyone. So hopefully this will be helpful in just learning more about the different attachment styles. The primary reason for this training is purely that, to make you more familiar with the attachment styles. All of ABI's staff, of course, receives a great deal of training when they first are hired onto the agency, and a lot of that training includes information regarding attachment. In our adoptive parent training that we have our adoptive parents complete during the home study or adoption process, there's also a great deal of attachment related information that we provide for parents. So much of the work that we do with adoptive families and adopted children revolves around relationships and attachment. Not only the attachment of the child to the adoptive parents, but of the adoptive parents to the child, of the child to the siblings already in the home, and vice versa. So there are a lot of interpersonal relationships at play in the adoption process. Lots of bonds being made and attachments being made. So understanding the different attachment styles that people have is quite essential to formulating attachments. So there are multiple reasons for this training. The first is that we felt it was a good follow-up to the interviews and questionnaires training that I did. We also felt it would strengthen our adoption specialist's ability to support families in the post-adoption phase after the family has come home, if the adoption specialist has an understanding of different attachment styles. Lastly, we have found a pattern with our adoptive families as of recently, that when they come home with a child and they're in the post-placement phase, that this is when the adoption family is struggling due to attachment issues. We've seen actually a lot on the last year that a lot of these issues are not particularly stemming from the child having difficulty attaching to the adoptive parents as much as the adoptive family attaching to the child. So it goes both ways. So what this training is not is also important to understand as you view this. This is purely an informative training. This is not an all-inclusive training for you to understand everything there is to know about the different attachment styles. Once you have completed this training, you will simply understand the attachment styles better. You will in no way be qualified to assess or evaluate what somebody's attachment style is. It's very important that you know that. We are in no way qualified or able to assess someone's attachment style. While you can provide families with information on the 4 different attachment styles and encourage them to research it more and find out more information for themselves, you cannot assess the family's attachment styles. If you are working with an adoptive family, either pre-adoption or post-adoption, and you have concerns regarding their attachment styles that you just assess merely from meeting with them, and you have some concerns, then talk to your supervisor about those concerns and you can address them that way. When it does come to assessing attachment styles, there is something called the adult attachment inventory that can be completed. And this is a diagnostic tool, not a diagnostic tool, but a clinical tool used by psychologists and psychiatrists to ascertain what people's attachment styles are. I believe some of our staff has had the adult attachment interview that AAI completed on them. I know I had to have it completed on me when I was going through my TBRI training. So families are able to have it completed on them by psychologists and psychiatrists, and staff are as well if you're willing to pay to have one of those completed. But let's start talking attachment. There are 3 attachments scholars that I'm going to mention today in this training. The first is John Bowlby, which many of you are probably familiar with, especially those of you that have been working in the adoption community for a deal of time. John Bowlby developed the attachment theory during the 1950s. He was an English psychiatrist, and he was working in post-World War II England, and he was working with orphans who were orphans due to the war and had faced trauma. Bowlby's theory identified that the caregiver's care provides safety and security for the child, and therefore the child will seek close proximity with his or her caregiver when in a dangerous or stressful situation. John Bowlby also theorized that children are born with an innate ability to form attachments, that it's not a learned behavior. And this was in direct contrast to the attachment theories that had come before him, because the attachment theories that had come before him had said that attachment is a learned behavior when a caregiver takes care of a child, that it's not an innate ability a child has. But John Bowlby theorized that it's an innate ability that someone is born with to be able to attach to a caregiver, to someone that is providing safety and security for them. The second individual that I'm going to mention today is Mary Ainsworth, and she studied with Bowlby. They studied together in the 1950s, and then during the 1970s she did some of her most famous work when she did an experiment called the Strange Situation. For those of you that are social workers or have gone to school for social work or something similar, you have probably learned about the Strange Situation and viewed videos on the Strange Situation. A brief synopsis of what the Strange Situation was that Mary Ainsworth, she gathered mothers and their infants over the age of 1. It was like ages 1 to 18 months, so 12 to 18 months. She gathered infants and their mothers. She would place them in a room together, a strange room that they didn't know. Then she would introduce a stranger into the room. Then she would have the mother leave the room. Then she would have the mother come back and be in the room with the stranger and the baby. And so her and her team would observe what was going on with the mother and the infant and their interactions and relationship with one another during this time. So she and her colleagues observed the baby's behaviors and the mother's responsiveness to the child. If you go on YouTube and you search The Strange Situation, it's not the exact Mary Ainsworth Strange Situation that you'll find on there, but you'll find some videos from the 90s of psychologists doing the same experiment and doing the same setup with mothers and their children. And they're interesting to view. If you've never viewed those before, I'd encourage you to go on YouTube and look up The Strange Situation and watch some of those videos and look at the dynamics between the mother and the children and how the babies respond when the mother leaves the room and the baby is perceived to be in a stressful situation. It's quite interesting to watch. From her studies, Mary Ainsworth then came up with 3 attachment styles. The attachment styles that she came up with were secure as the primary one, and then the other 2 were both called insecure, but one was insecure ambivalent and one was insecure avoidant, were the 3 that she came up with. So then we move on to the third person I'm going to talk about in this training, and that is Mary Main. Mary Main was a grad student for Mary Ainsworth, and so she worked with Mary Ainsworth on The Strange Situation in the 1970s. And then once Mary Ainsworth moved on, Mary Main was her successor, continued the work that she had done. And what they found was that in these strange situations, there was another group that was emerging that they couldn't really classify into those 3. And so they had lumped them into the secure attachment style. But as Mary Main did more research and did more of these experiments, she came up with a fourth attachment style, and it goes in the insecure bundle of attachment styles, and it is typically referred to as disorganized attachment style. So those are the 4 attachment styles that we know today. We have secure, and then we have 3 insecures: avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. So those are the 4 different attachment styles. The other thing that Mary Main did in the psychologist community in regards to studying attachment is she is the one that came up with the adult attachment interview that I mentioned earlier. She came up with this assessment tool to assess an adult's attachment style. I am going to pause this and I'm going to move on to the next video because, as you guys know, I can only make my videos so big on my computer. So we'll move on to the next one.